Well, there is a very enlightening new report, very detailed, from Yahoo News on the Trump administration's secret war on WikiLeaks, which we kind of all knew was going on, but it's interesting to get some inside details, at least what they claim to be inside details. These are anonymous sources, of course, but there are lots and lots of anonymous sources. There's a lot of detail here, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say odds are they probably didn't just make this entire story up. There's a lot of stuff here that they would have had to make up. So I'm not going to say that this is all 100% gospel, but it's stuff that makes sense and is certainly plausible. And so what we learn in here is that the CIA, from the time that Trump was sworn in, made it its mission to go after WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. That was public enemy number one, which is ironic considering that without Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, there's a decent chance that Trump would have never been elected president. People forget that Trump's victory was only assured by a handful of votes in a few states. It was a number not in hundreds of thousands or the millions, but rather the tens of thousands. And tens of thousands of votes in a country of 320 million people is a very slim margin there. And I think that there's nobody who would argue that the damning leaks published by Julian Assange and WikiLeaks during the 2016 cycle on net certainly did a lot more to help Donald Trump than hurt him. Remember, the Podesta emails? Remember delicious hot dogs? That was all, that was all stuff that hurt Hillary and made it possible, I would say, for Trump to win. And so how does Trump repay Julian Assange once he's elected and he's in office? When Trump was running, remember, he was at rallies, he was going, "We love the WikiLeaks. Yes, more WikiLeaks. Vladimir, if you're listening, I'll take whatever help of Hillary." That part was a little tongue-in-cheek. But certainly, Trump did not seem like somebody who was anti-WikiLeaks. He understood full well that WikiLeaks was helping him politically. And yet, what does he do? He stabs him in the back. He appoints Mike Pompeo to be the CIA director. Mike Pompeo, the human salamander, a true lizard person if there ever was one. The man who said quite candidly that, when you go to the CIA, they teach you how to lie and lie and lie some more. That guy, the guy who wants to be the successor to, Trump's MAGA movement and be the next president of the United States. Fox News' favorite for the 2024 Republican nomination, that Mike Pompeo, in a surprise to no one, spearheaded this whole plot against Julian Assange, going so far as to plot his assassination. I should have said that up front. That's the headline. I'll make that the title of this video. Trump administration plotted to assassinate Julian Assange. Because that certainly seems to be true. And honestly, after, the last few years, I would have been very surprised if that was not the case. I think what saved Julian Assange is that not his protection by the Ecuadorian government, which unfortunately ran out. It was the fact that he was being protected by them in the United Kingdom. If he had been given asylum by Ecuador and just went and moved into that country, they would have killed him years and years and years ago. The problem is, Julian Assange, is in a building in London, overlooking the street. The U.S. can't just go and, murder him in the middle of London. In an embassy. That would create a much bigger problem, because the United Kingdom probably would not be too happy about that. I don't think the United Kingdom wants assassinations going on in London. That's something that you would expect in, I don't know, Lisbon or Vienna during the Cold War, but not London in the 2020s. Now, I think that the MAGA crowd, if they address this story at all, will probably try and just, spin this and say, there's that Mike Pompeo. That's why Mike Pompeo shouldn't be the nominee in 2024, which is true. But they're going to downplay Trump's responsibility in all this. Who was it that appointed Mike Pompeo to be the director of the CIA? Oh, that's right. It was Donald Trump. Who was it that promoted Mike Pompeo to be the Secretary of State, who is, I believe, fourth in line to become the president in the line of succession? The most important cabinet official, Secretary of State, for all of American history. The Secretary of State's a very important person. They are in charge of American foreign policy. And who was it that Donald Trump put in that position? Oh, it was Mike Pompeo. Trump was not just stabbed in the back by, deep state actors who, he couldn't control, who were, embedded in the bureaucracy. He brought those people into his cabinet. He brought them into his administration. He said, you know what? No. See, hey, deep state Mike, we can be friends. I can get along with the CIA. See? I appointed you. So there's no reason for the CIA to come after me. That's what Trump thought. He thought he could buy these people off. Which, I don't know if he learned his lesson. He never fired Mike Pompeo. And you could say, and I think the reason for that is that, publicly, Mike Pompeo was very loyal to Trump personally. Which is true. I guess that was smart of Pompeo. Pompeo would always, stroke Trump's ego. And for that, Pompeo was allowed to get away with doing whatever sort of, run-of-the-mill, deep state hackery he wanted to get away with. And so when it comes to stuff like this, this is one of those areas, kind of like the war in Yemen, why I could never call myself one, like a Trump supporter, unironically, without qualifiers. Because there's no way to support this. There's no way to defend this. There's no way to say, Trump just, he made a mistake. This is not a mistake. Or, it's very intentional. It's not like he didn't know what he was doing. Trump could have pardoned Assange the day he came into office. He could have pardoned Assange the day he left office. He chose to do none of that because he's a coward, because he has no loyalty. He demands loyalty of everyone else, but offers none in return. I think that they're always... Remember, Assange, going back to Assange now, he was in the embassy since 2012. The deep state always wanted to take him out. He was always a big target of theirs. But I think it's unquestionable that all ramped up once Trump got into office because, there were so many TDS-riddled folks in D.C., 99% of Washington, D.C., who directly blamed Julian Assange for Trump being elected. And so everyone in the deep state, again, this is 90-something%, who didn't want Trump in office, took out their anti-Trump rage on Assange and made his life even worse. Hell, it's the Trump administration who decided to prosecute Assange. And again, who appointed that attorney general? I believe it was started under Barr. I don't think it started under Sessions, but it might have. But either way, this happened in Trump's Justice Department. And he did nothing about it. This happened because of him. And so he owns all of this. He owns the plotted assassinations. He owns the prosecution. He owns the pain and suffering. And frankly, I don't know how he sleeps at night. There's a lot of things that I look at from the Trump administration, and I go to myself and I say, I don't know how Trump sleeps at night. Because I don't think of him, like somebody like Hillary, who Hillary is pure evil. There's nothing that's going to faze her. She's a bad person. We understand that. But as we all know, Trump's not cut from exactly that same cloth. And so you would think to yourself that, at least in his own head, he thinks he's doing the right thing. But then you get in these situations where you look at things that he's done, and you say there's no way that any free-thinking person thought they were doing the right thing here. You have to know that you're evil. And the worst part about it is that if Trump runs for president again, which seems almost certain that he will, based on what he's been saying publicly, he's not the most subtle guy in the world. He will win the nomination, and there will be not even a hint of like a mea culpa. He will not admit to anything that he did wrong in in his first administration. I guess he'll give us some small. He'll throw us some small bones, like he'll say, "Hey, I should have fired Fauci." Oh, okay, great. Thanks for telling us that now. But on the big foreign policy stuff, I mean, I guess he said, "Oh well, Milley was terrible and all these things." He's willing to say things, but not enough. He's not giving us enough. His only problem with Bill Barr is that Bill Barr wasn't personally loyal to him. Mike Pompeo was, but Bill Barr and Mike Pompeo cut from the same cloth. They have slightly different temperaments, because at the end of the day, Bill Barr was happy to throw Trump under the bus, and Mike Pompeo wasn't, but that's just because they have different future interests. Mike Pompeo wants to pursue a political career. He wants to run for president. Bill Barr just wants to go back to being a corporate shill lawyer. And so they have to present themselves differently vis-a-vis Trump to the public in order to serve their own selfish interests. But that's not a fundamental difference. Fundamentally, they're the same animal. And so if you just have an army of deep state hacks show up and put on a MAGA hat, Trump will appoint them all to all the highest positions of government. They will get all the jobs, and it will be business as usual. And frankly, that's what I was afraid of when Trump was elected, because he is heavily influenced by people who praise him. And so if bad people say, "Hey, Trump, I like you. You should do these things," he'll go, "Oh, that's a pretty good idea." And not a lot of people were as smart as Mike Pompeo to actually do that fully. Bill Barr, I don't really count, because Bill Barr was always loyal to the Bush family. The Bushes, from what I understand, got Bill Barr the job. Now, the one upside is that as more and more terrible details like this come out about how the U.S. plotted to assassinate Julian Assange, maybe that will offend the British government to such a degree that they halt Assange's extradition. Because that, on top of the fact that the U.S. is trying to extradite Assange under pretenses that under which he could not receive the death penalty, and then they want to charge him with something to give him the death penalty after he's been extradited, because of course in Britain you can't extradite someone if they're going to receive the death penalty. That is against the law in Britain. If on top of that it comes out that the U.S. already wanted to assassinate him a long time ago, and they just said, no, we can't do that because of optics, I think that the British courts might say, you know what, it seems awfully likely that if we extradite this guy, he's going to be executed. And so maybe they will stand up for themselves in London and halt this extradition. So, with that said, I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.